All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 2nd of July, 2025, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat each other as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you have any questions or would like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. I invite everyone to check out the agenda, add any topics there if you like, and please add yourself to the attending if you feel so. All right, so at the beginning of our meetings, we like to make some time for new attendees who would like to introduce themselves to the community or say hi to do so. So I will be quiet for a few seconds here, and if anyone would like to unmute and say hi, please go ahead and do so.
I'll go. Hello, everybody. I've previously been in this meeting, I don't know, probably about six-ish or longer months ago. But I'm back. I'm Jake Hyde. I am an employee at SUSE. Um, and I am also one of Alex's coworkers.
Awesome. Welcome, Jake. You're in great company hanging out with Alex. He's a good dude.
Agreed.
All right. I'm not seeing any other mics unmuting. So we will move along to our open proposal readouts. So do we have Alessandro here to talk about the auto scaling from zero proposal? I think this is just still waiting for reviews. So I don't really think there's much that's changed here. We could just kind of check the end. Yeah, I'm just waiting on a couple of reviews, one from myself. So I'll add that to my to-do list. All right, next one. Propagating taints from machine templates down to nodes. Do we have anyone who'd like to talk about this proposal? Don't think I see Nolan here, but looks like maybe we're waiting on reviews. All right. And lastly, the chained and efficient upgrades for clusters. I do see Fabrizio here. Did you want to give any updates on this?
Yeah, last week um I changed the proposal, not the proposal, basically the I dropped from the proposal the change of the book because most probably it is not going to make the release. But the proposal, so this make the proposal simpler to review. Uh, yeah, looking for folks that have a little bit of time to look into it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to our regular discussion topics now. The first one is to Matt. You've got a CAPI release to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We released V1.11.0 Alpha 2 yesterday. There's actually quite a bit of change in here, and there's a lot of stuff stacked up in main right now. So there's a lot of please jump on this if you can. I just did the release, so I'm actually not as knowledgeable. Maybe one of the maintainers wants to jump in and summarize the changes. If not, you can just read about them right here. But things are moving quickly, so it behooves all of us to try and integrate with this as soon as possible. Anything else to add, Fabrizio, Stefan?
I can give it a try, except if Fabrizio wants.
Please go, Seth.
Yeah, but keep the page open. So I have a chance. So basically, we're now trying to just settle down a bit. But there's still a bunch of stuff that we have to finish up. So trying to summarize, basically we are finishing up CapD to move CapD to beta 2. Then we finished changing on the references. So I think what this alpha now includes is that references on machine deployment, machine cluster, etc., that they don't have a namespace anymore and they don't have a full API version anymore, only an API group. So that might be a bit disruptive. Then Yeah, we did a bit of work around basically we had an option on our webhooks, but that to preserve the previous control under behavior, but that was dropping basically fields that omit empty would drop. And we basically removed that option. So basically now mutating webhooks are not just modifying objects because of some weird side effects, but to make sure that this change does not trigger rollouts, we had to make some changes in KCP and our cluster topology controller. So the PRs are there, like cluster class, remove default or option, KCP tolerates diff, if someone wants to look into that. Then a bunch more ref changes on machine hive check. That's just smaller ones. Let's see if there's something bigger. Yeah, we reverted one thing we did. So basically we're cleaning up some fields in KCP that were basically what we thought redundant to other fields on cluster. But someone that already tested Alpha 1, which was pretty nice, gave us feedback that basically they need a control plane endpoint field. So we added it back for now. Fabrizio also added a comment to some issue that Joel opened a while ago around like there was a proposal or HackMD around external endpoint, internal endpoint. So we didn't just try to implement this like because we have so much time, but basically we thought about this a little bit, and Fabrizio posted a comment there how we could potentially implement like something like external control plane endpoint, internal control plane endpoint, and that sort of stuff in the future because it's tightly related to this topic of having a control plane endpoint on KCP. So basically, you can use a control plane endpoint on KCP today to have like a second control plane endpoint with kubeflip or something like that. Otherwise, I think we are fine. Yeah, I would just recommend bumping, testing, and taking a closer look at those PRs in general. Our current focus is definitely around making sure that our fields are serialized correctly. So we have, in general, fields are either optional and required, and there are conventions for optional and required fields. That there should be pointers or not pointers, omit empty or omit zero. And we're just trying to get like most of this fixed up. While talking about that, thanks very much towards Joel, who's like giving us like the right opinions there. But yeah, it's a ton of work. I think we'll get through it, but let's see. So there will be more like this in the next beta that should be out in 2 weeks. So there are more changes pending, or we're just merging a bunch of them. I hope that for once we get beta or the second beta, it should be all pretty stable. It's already stable. We're now hitting stuff that usually nobody's really affected by. It's just to be clear. Yep, that's it. Fabrizio, I don't know if you want to add something. And you're muted.
Yeah, so I think taking a step back, as Stefan saying, we are reaching a good point. I think we overachieved what was expected to get into the beta too. If we take I think that the biggest story is that this beta is a significant step towards the V1 version of our API, because we cleaned up a lot of technical debt, duplicated field, etc., etc. So we made a huge step towards up to date or still being written API guidelines. We improved the condition is probably the biggest one, but there are tons in terms of small changes in how we model bool field, optional field, all the great work that is being done in Cal basically is reflected. And now in Cluster API, I think that we have a really good compliance with the Cal linter, which is a tool that I recommend everyone which is building APIs, because it's getting really, really powerful and helpful for any API author. So yeah, still doing some work. Hopefully in the next 15 days we will start to really slow down and focusing on testing and stabilization, etc., which will take a little bit longer than usual. This is why we we try to finish a little bit early than the code freeze. That is the implementation on API changes. But yeah, thank you again to Joel and also to Takuma, which is really helping on CapD.
Yeah, and I would say thank you to everyone who's been contributing. These releases are amazing, and just seeing the amount of work that's going on is really inspiring. You know, I wish I had more time to review some of this stuff, but yeah, it's really amazing to see the amount of work going into it. So kudos to everyone who's putting all this together, and just thank you to the community in general. Matt, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, I agree. I can see amazing work is being done, and the best I can do is like glance at these PRs. I wish I could dig in a little more. I will try. Just some housekeeping stuff for the release team since we were on this topic. Like Stefan said, there'll be a beta in 2 weeks, and the bar is a little higher for beta. So if you have some changes you've been thinking about, try and get them in. But also, the release lead for this cycle, Chris Privateer, who you probably all know, has done a great job, but his new employer said he can't be the lead of any project loosely defined, so he had to step down. So I'm going to do it for the remainder of the term, and we have someone who's going to be CI lead in a couple weeks, and so it should be fine. But just so you know, that's the new release team structure.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and thanks to Chris, thanks to Matt. And I guess thanks to our next person who's going to step up too. It's a great community here with a lot of communication and strength in it. All right, are there any other questions or comments about this alpha release? Okay. Moving on then, I've got the next topic. So basically, I'm proposing, I've put a patch up to propose the retirement of the Carpenter Integration Working Group. This should be relatively uncontroversial. The last several meetings, I was the only one there, so I think probably now is the time to to kind of retire it. We did complete our goal of creating an experimental cluster API provider for, Carpenter provider for cluster API. And I think there's work continuing there with the experiment. And if we need more meetings, I think we'll probably convert to having project meetings at this point. But I think it's clear that the feature group kind of achieved what it wanted to, and probably it's time to close that off at this point. So if anyone has comments or questions, feel free to leave them on the poll that I made there. Anybody have questions or comments about that topic? Yeah, Fabrizio.
I just want to thank you for driving this. I really appreciate it. Looking forward for the next step of maturity on this effort.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And, I've got a couple other folks looking at it. I've, kind of been an encouraging note. I've had several people reach out to me on Kube Slack. I know people have tried this, kind of experimental provider on several different cluster API implementations now. So we're trying to get it updated to the latest versions of Carpenter and cluster API. And yeah, we'll just keep working, and hopefully we'll get it to the point where it'll be usable by people at some point. Thank you, Fabrizio. All right, moving on. Alex and Jake, you've got a topic about external load balancers, question mark. So I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, I remember the discussion was here a couple years ago, maybe, and then there was like a draft of some proposal, but I don't think it was ever finished or brought to a state where people proposed it through a PR. But shortly speaking, we want to have load balancers that don't depend on infrastructure providers, maybe something like load balancer provider, so we can bring our own. And yeah, the question is where the discussion ended and why was it never implemented, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Jake, you have some more information there.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of context here. I did skim the old proposal as well, and I saw that it kind of aligned a lot with some of the things we were looking for. So, like generally speaking, what we found is for our users that are using CAPI or evaluating it, um, there is a certain class of users, specifically on-prem, where they want a higher degree of control over what they're using, as well as, some things in the proposal, like being able to use selectors to assign maybe machines to multiple load balancers. Um, and, for one reason or another, they're either, unwilling to use the load balancers that are offered maybe by their cloud platform, or cannot for compliance reasons, right? And so this is separate from like Rancher has this entire a concept of a cluster agent, which would be nice to, implement as part of a framework like this, but it's something entirely separate for, users that are just using like CAPI upstream providers where, we would love to have something like, I don't know, Cube VIP, HA proxy, just give them the option to either use some provider, write their own, etc. Um, and yeah, just wondering like where that left off, if there's still interest in getting something like this done.
So, does anyone remember that old proposal or would like to speak to this?
Isn't that still listed somewhere in the doc? Like up the top, I think there's an
Could be,
item
yeah.
with my name on it somewhere.
But I think that's already like the second generation of the proposal. There was like a previous one for 2 years, I think, before that.
Yeah. So
You're saying somewhere up here, oh, this one.
yeah, this one. So I remember like there was some interest in this. Nadir is interested in it as well, and I think at some point we just all got busy doing other things, and it became a lower priority for each of us and got stale. I don't think there was anything necessarily that stopped it moving forward apart from that lack of time and kind of input. Certainly for our use, it wasn't something we wanted to move forward with. I think there are other load balancer implementations that are serving a lot of what we would be doing there. So there's potential there'll be quite a lot of overlap.
And there's also HackMD from you, right? That's basically the first version here, that PR, and then there's a HackMD that is also linked somewhere, maybe on
Yeah.
the corresponding issue or something, which is like the new version, I think mostly around external and internal load balancer. I'm not sure what the scope of this one was.
You're saying you think there's a HackMD on maybe on the issue is what you're saying?
No, it's still an open issue.
This one's closed.
Somewhere. I think, yeah.
I know because Fabrizio commented on it like yesterday. Because we're looking into this control plane endpoint stuff.
Well, all I know is as of about 3 years ago, Stefan and Joel were still kind of interested in it.
Number 5295 is the one we
What
commented
was it?
on.
5295.
5295. But I don't know where the HackMD was linked, if it's on that one or somewhere else.
Might be at the
I think-
top of the Git or the Google Doc.
This certainly looks like it. This is the doc we're talking about?
That was the
Could
one I mentioned, yeah, but a few people have their hands raised.
Yeah, Nolan, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the recent interest in this would be,
Nolan, your mic's gotten really quiet again.
sorry, the recent interest from us on this would be supporting multiple endpoints rather than some sort of provider. And I think Joel's last comment on the issue kind of echoed that. It was there were a couple parts to this, that one was supporting multiple endpoints and the other was supporting like some sort of abstraction for provide load balancers. And I think from our perspective, we became more interested in just support for multiple endpoints, and we figured out ways to implement that directly in providers. So that's part of, I think, where our focus went.
Fabrizio?
I sort of agree. So I don't remember exactly why the proposal got stuck, probably because no one pushed it. But if I read it, if I skim through not this one, the other proposal, it looks to me that we are sort of aiming to something that is too much. So at the end, Cluster API is designed to bring up a cluster. And in my opinion, it is clear that in the scope, if you think about exposing one or an internal load, control plane endpoint, an external control plane endpoint, we are talking about something which is part of the cluster infrastructure. Okay. If instead we start talking about a generic construct of load balancer that can sit in front of machines that by chance are created by CAPI, or arbitrary machine in front of workers or something like that, it seems like that we are trying to reinvent cloud abstraction or Terraform stuff or whatever, which is generic infrastructure that sit in front of machines and which is not specific of the cluster. So if I can give my 2 cents, since this effort already stalled, I will try to stay as much as focused on the cluster and try to address what is in the ECMD, which is really focused on, yeah, but my cluster, I want to that some traffic goes stay internal, some traffic stay external because security or cost of the network traffic. So this seems well focused, and it is specific for the control plane. A generic construct of load balancer in front of arbitrary machines, in my opinion, seems it is a little bit borderline with the scope of CAPI.
Nolan, please.
I guess redirecting to the question at hand versus the proposals that existed, Jake and Alex, would it be enough for you to be able to tell Cappy this is a load balancer that exists and use that, versus having like a whole provider concept that generates them and acts very much like Terraform? Like, would it be sufficient for your needs to allow Cappy to, or tell Cappy to not manage load balancers and use a provided one?
I think that would get us like, 99% of the way there. Because, we still want certain things, right? We still want VPCs and subnets and security groups. It's just not always applicable to have a load balancer. I mean, and at least provisioned from the infrastructure provider. To give like a more concrete example, within Rancher, we have this concept of, splitting our server nodes. So we have a plane that runs etcd, we have a plane that runs control plane, right? And we've had a lot of problems trying to use the upstream infrastructure providers with that, because I mean, if you want to have load balancers for that, you would need two load balancers, right? So if it's not possible to do it such that we have load balancers for each plane or like even beyond that, like we said, workers, etc. Letting users manage their own, it does, at least it opens up a path to using these providers in a way that's like not currently possible for that use case. And that's not the only use case either, but TLDR, yes.
This is a good discussion, and it sounds like we're almost ready to begin in the next round of load balancer proposals. That we'll go for round 3 on this. Fabrizio, please.
Yeah, I was searching for an issue. I will search and link it later, but there is already an issue discussing probably the same topic that Jake brought up. So the issue is the following. In Cluster API, it is already possible, if you look at the core API types, to bring your own load balancer. And this basically address the 90% of the edge cases that someone can have due to any limitation that could happen in an environment. Okay, the problem is that today the contract around how to use how to implement load balancer in infra provider and also in control plane provider is not well defined. That led to a confusion where we have 3 or 4 feared copy and almost every provider is using them in a different way. And that's the core issue. And for instance, since the contract is not explicit that an infra provider must allow or should allow bring your own load balancer, not all of them are doing it. I make an example. With CapV, it's pretty common bring your own load balancer or bring your own IP, and then you can use KubeVip or whatever to build your load balancer. But in other provider, it's not possible. So even if you use the same API, the same cluster API to object to start the cluster, the end result will be different. Okay, and this is an issue on the contract, and this issue is described. We have an issue where we had a long discussion and then sort of stalled. So we have 2 problems on the table. One is to make our API, and more specifically the contract around our API, more clear, more describing of all the possible use case, like bring your own infra provider, or I want you to use a port, a specific port, but figure it out the IP, or yeah, there are a couple of sub cases. And so this is the first problem. Make the contract more clear and make sure that all the provider somehow get there. The second part is we know that our load balancer, that our story about load balancer is incomplete, because at least we need the possibility to have an internal load balancer and an external load balancer for the control plane, and maybe some option about how to that tells copy which one it has to use for the copy that it itself generates toward the workload cluster. So those are 2 problems that are sort of related. This is what I discussed with Stefan while looking at the change for V1 Beta 2. So I will link the issue. I kindly ask Jake and Alex to look into the two issue to see if what they are facing basically fall into this bucket. And the bucket I just to make it issue is, oh, we have fields in copy. From one side, they are not entirely complete. From the other side, the consumption of this field across infra provider is not homogeneous. And that's the issue that we faced in the past.
This definitely sounds like a deep rabbit hole, but thanks everyone for explaining it there. Alex and Jake, does this kind of give you some next steps and things to follow up on at this point, or do you have more questions, or I guess is there anything else we can do now?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thanks a lot. Very good discussion.
Cool, thank you. Good to see you, Alex. All right. If there's no other questions or comments about this topic, I guess we will move on to provider updates. So Matt, you've got a provider update for CAPC.
Yeah, no big whoop, just a couple of patch releases that catch us up with the latest CAPI 1.10.3 and 1.9, whatever it is. And behind the scenes, there's actually a lot of change because we were trying to get our CI green again, which we have mostly accomplished, but the only user visible changes are bumping CAPI. So.
All right, great, thank you. And lastly, we'll get to our feature group updates. So Tilo, you've got a feature group node bootstrapping.
Yeah, just a quick one. So we, since the people were kind of concerned about the amount of changes in the latest main, we rebased our core cluster API work on the latest main, and that includes the recent work on V1 Beta 2. So that's in now, and this is basically what we need to upstream in order to get the bootstrap separation done. This is not the kubeadm ignition bootstrap provider yet, but we're basically keeping that up to date as well. And there's like few things to do only. And as usual, we're looking for contributors. If you want to join us, the next call is tomorrow, 3 p.m. UTC. And there's the agenda doc linked there.
Great, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. I'll give one last chance in case people have an ad hoc question or topic they want to bring up. Going once, going twice. Okay, sounds like we'll take back about 25 minutes of our day. Tilo and others in Germany, please stay cool out there, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Later, everybody.